Hello and welcome to 251, Two Pianists, 5 Minutes, One Podcast. This is an ongoing series of jazz vignettes. My name's Simon Whiteside.
And my name's Nick Tomalin, and we have a Patreon page where we upload content, transcriptions we've done, which relate to the podcast, special episodes of the podcast. So you can search for that on Patreon 2-5-1. So today we ask, tuba or not tuba? That is the question. We're looking at the role of the tuba in jazz. Well, in the early days of jazz, the tuba was really the main bass instrument. It was considered part of the rhythm section. And it really kind of migrated from the New Orleans marching bands and became a jazz instrument. And most of the early ensembles would have had a tuba in them. And really the tuba's role in the early jazz ensembles, it was quite limited. It really just played the bass notes, the roots and the fifths, with a few little connecting phrases. It didn't really improvise at all. But there were some quite well-known tuba players. So, for example, Pete Briggs, who played with Louis' Hot Seven, Lawson Burford, who played with King Oliver, and Cyrus St. Clair, who also played with King Oliver. However, what happened really was that towards the beginning of the 1930s, the double bass really took over from the tuba. And in fact, a lot of these tuba players actually went on to take up the double bass, which became the main bass instrument really throughout the 30s and the sort of swing era. And it wasn't really until, I'd say, probably the late 40s when the tuba began being used again. And I think you wanted to say a bit more about this, Simon.
Yeah, I mean, Birth of the Cool is an album which was very influential on arrangers, particularly the West Coast arrangers. Of course, Gil Evans, Jerry Mulligan being part of that album. And the effect of that was to start up bands. Shorty Rogers used tuba, and in conjunction with French horn, in fact. And then Marty Paich Dectet, Gil Evans' his own 10-tet, all had tuba as an extra instrument, not as the bass instrument. They all had double bass as well. And you mentioned some people before. Red Callender was one of those people who moved from the tuba to the double bass, for example. And I think Bill Barber was very associated with, where he was associated with Claude Thornhill, and I think he might have been the bass player on the, we haven't double-checked this, but the Birth of the Cool sessions. But I think what happened was that it became a much more round orchestral type sound, which is certainly what the West Coast, it was that sort of slightly classical crossover thing. And there's some really interesting things in the Shorty Rogers thing I've been listening to recently. There's tuba, baritone sax, and arco double bass combining in an introduction to call, it's a very orchestral effect. But I think we need to also talk about the great tuba players from Bebop onwards who had more of a role in improvising. Yeah,
I mean, probably the first tuba player who sort of attempted to play bebop on the tuba was Ray Draper, who recorded an album in 1957 called Tuba Sounds, which actually featured people like Mal Waldron and Jackie McLean. I mean, it's a good kind of first attempt in a way, but you can really hear, it sort of really brings it home how difficult it is to play bebop on the tuba. And it wasn't really until Howard Johnson, who was really, I'd say, the first sort of tuba virtuoso who could really play bebop and modern jazz on the tuba. He took over from Red Callender in Charlie Mingus's band, actually, in 1964, but went on to work with Hank Mobley, Archie Shepp, Oliver Nelson, Carla Bley, and formed his own tuba ensemble, believe it or not, called Gravity, which released 2 albums. A couple of other names probably worth mentioning. Theon Cross is a young British tuba player. He's part of the new British jazz renaissance and has played with Sons of Kemet, etc. Probably mention should also go to Tuba Gooding Jr., plays with the Roots, who are the house band on Tonight with the Jimmy Fallon show. Just for the pun, I think, is worthy of a mention. And so that's it for this episode on the tuba in jazz. And it's goodbye from me, Nick Tomalin.
And goodbye from me, Simon Whiteside.